This is the inner dimension, part 2 of Parshas VAYESHEV. Sweetening a bitter thought. The Maggid of Mezrich, disciple and successor of the Baal Shem Tov, explains the meaning of tamar. Tamar is the end of bitterness. Tam-mar. A foreign thought is bitter, but in truth, it is innocent. Tama. Sometimes foreign thoughts trouble an individual during his prayers. In the better case, these may be thoughts about his business or his family's issues. In the worst case, sinful reflections enter his mind. At the moment, he must understand that this irritating thought has a positive root and source. He realizes that this thought originates in the holy letters. It is merely their order that is foolish. The Maggid explains that the source of all thoughts is in the sacred Hebrew letters, the building blocks of creation. If a specific thought appears foolish and sinful, it is because we have combined letters incorrectly. The root of the initial thought remains pure and holy, but it is as if we have wrongly assembled the puzzle. One example of such a letter combination that is turned from good into evil is in the verse in this Torah portion, Judah's firstborn, was evil in God's eyes. When an individual realizes that his improper thoughts are a misinterpretation of something good, he can enter the world of exchanges. And from these combinations, other words can be formed. From words of folly emerge words of Torah. A foreign thought is bitter and evil, but recognizing its source elevates it to its root, to the world of exchanges, in which the puzzle can be reconstructed and the folly sweetened. Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the Alter Rebbe, the youngest and dearest disciple of the Maggid, writes that this method of elevating foreign thoughts is the service of the righteous. The instruction for the general populace is to ignore or expel the improper thought. Nevertheless, the realization that foreign thoughts are rooted in a positive source is something to which we can all relate. As we approach the final redemption, this service of the righteous will become increasingly available to all individuals. The explanation offered by the Maggid shines a new light on the story of Judah and Tamar. Judah thought the woman he met was a prostitute, Kadesha, but in truth, she was his righteous and holy, Kedosha, daughter-in-law. He thought that Tamar had become pregnant illegitimately, but in truth, she was pregnant with his own child. Tamar, who covered her face, was like an improper thought that masks its true source. The moment Judah realized the truth, all the bitterness turned into sweetness. We too can transform the bitterness of improper thoughts into sweetness if, instead of being overwhelmed by them, we can recognize them as misleading inferences, the source of which is pure and holy, nullifying the ego. Every individual has an innate sense of ego, which begins with the realization that I exist. It can easily deteriorate into egocentrism and self-aggrandizement. Self-pride separates us from our divine source. The Hasidic way of serving God is to refine our sense of self with the realization that God creates us anew every moment. Thus, our ego is essentially non-existent. God created the world something from nothing. The Maggid of Mezrich taught that the service of the righteous is to turn the something, the ego, back into nothing. This is universally relevant since your people are all righteous. Everyone can achieve this state of selflessness especially during prayer. Humbling all the comfortable feelings of the ego gives us about ourselves, and nullifying them is a bitter experience. The bitterness Mar alluded to in Tamar's name refers to the bitterness experienced while nullifying the ego. Yet, anyone who experiences a moment of true selflessness can appreciate the sweetness of the divine nothingness from which the world was created. With hindsight, we realize that the initial bitterness was our ego hijacking our innate sense of standing in the presence of God. How can an egotistic stance be anything but bitter? The taste of true ego nullification and submission to God is sweeter than honey. Judah's act in submission to God is sweeter than honey. Judah's act of self-nullification began with the opening verse of the Torah portion. Judah descended from his brothers. He took to heart the act he instigated against Joseph and their father. He was the first to lower his ego to some extent. The sages relate that God then sent an angel of desire to arouse his base cravings. Thanks to this fall, he reached the climax of selflessness by acknowledging that he was the father of Tamar's pregnancy. All the bitterness of his initial egotistic state transformed into the sweetness of a humbled, refined self. This was how the light of Mashiach shone into the world.